All right. So thanks everyone who's in the room with us and virtually. I appreciate it. My name is Austin Ramirez. I'm the Community and Economic Development Manager at Lane County, Oregon, and moderating today's panel. So I apologize for not being able to be there in person when we had planned this. I was hoping to be there, but like a lot of things, COVID disrupted that at the last minute. So I hope everyone's having a great conference there in person though. Our topic is on hybrid models for community and council commission meetings. But as the panel and I were discussing through this the past few weeks, we realized that that is just one piece of public engagement. So you'll definitely hear us talk about public meetings, but also more broadly talk about our journeys to improve and increase public engagement during what's been a very chaotic time for everyone. So with that, I'll go ahead and introduce our panelists today. So we have Ken Wilson and Steve Mokrahysky. Ken was appointed County Administrator of Franklin County, Ohio in January 2015. He leads 14 county agencies there with more than 1,400 employees and oversees the county's annual $1.8 billion budgeting process to ensure Franklin County remains one of the finest and best governed counties in the entire country. Prior to joining Franklin County, Ken was a Director of Policy for the Ohio Senate Minority Caucus. He holds a master's in public administration from Ohio University and a bachelor's from James Madison College at Michigan State University. Ken is also the president-elect of the National Association of County Administrators. Thanks for being here with us today, Ken. I appreciate that.
Thank you, Austin.
And now to our other panelist, Steve Mokrahysky. He joined Lane County, Oregon as County Administrator in May 2014. He has served in county government leadership in Oregon, Nevada, and Wisconsin for over 22 years. He's led with a focus on practical financial management, meaningful public engagement, and fostering cultures of leadership in local government. In 2019, Lane County's credit rating was raised for the second time in 2 years to its highest rating in history. Lane County has also been ranked as the second healthiest largest employer in Oregon for 4 years in a row, and among the top 100 healthiest workplaces in the country. Steve received a bachelor's from Marquette University and an MBA from the University of Wisconsin. He's also a public policy graduate at the Les Aspin Center for Government in Washington, D.C. Steve is the president of the National Association of County Administrators, and he's also my boss, so no pressure in this presentation from me. But thanks for your time today, Steve.
Thank you, Austin. Hello, everybody.
So before we jump straight into our presentation, Ken and Steve, I'm hoping you can tell us a little bit more about your home counties. So Ken, I'll start with you. How would you describe Franklin County to someone who's never been there?
Franklin County is the state capital. We are a hub for various sectors. We have a robust finance, insurance, and real estate sector here. We also benefit from a large public hospital system, nonprofit system. The Wexner Medical Center is part of the Ohio State University's complex, as well as we have other very large nonprofit healthcare companies here in Columbus, such as Ohio Health and Nationwide Children's Hospital, which is one of the largest pediatric hospitals in the country. And of course, we are the home of the Ohio State Buckeyes, and makes that one of the largest campuses in the United States. But Franklin County is now 1.3 million people, making it the largest county in the state of Ohio.
Great, thanks, Ken. We'll try not to get too much into a rivalry about college football, but Steve, can you talk a little bit about Lane County?
Yeah, I think we should start with college football. We've got a big game coming tomorrow between the Ohio State University and the University of Oregon Ducks, so that'll be a big one. Ken and I haven't wagered, but actually the first year that I was county administrator, the Ducks and the University of Oregon and the Ohio State University played each other in the national championship, and our boards, the Franklin County Board and the Lane County Board, actually did do a wager. We lost, and I think we set a bunch of we exchanged a bunch of gifts from our community. So that was fun. Hopefully it'll happen again. Pleased to be here with Ken and Austin and all of you. Tell you a little bit about Lane County. Eugene is the county seat, the home of the University of Oregon on the I-5 corridor. It's a county at large, geographic county, about 5,000 square miles, roughly the size of the state of Connecticut. And it runs from the Oregon coast to the peak of the Cascade Mountains, with Eugene and Springfield and the I-5 corridor running right through the middle of the county. We have 12 incorporated cities in Lane County, about 380,000 residents. In our organization, we have about 1,700 employees. And from a local community standpoint, in addition to the university, healthcare, wood products, the timber industry, food and beverage, high-tech manufacturing are all significant components. So we will be hosting in Oregon, in Portland, just in a few weeks, the International City County Management Association. So hopefully there's some of you that'll be able to join us here in Western Oregon in a few weeks. Great to be with you.
Thanks, Steve. Thanks, Ken, for the introductions. I appreciate it. We'll go ahead and jump in, and to start, I want to kind of take us back to the beginning of the pandemic a little bit. Everyone probably remembers January 2020 felt like there was talk of COVID, but not much of it, and that increased through February. And then in March, it just felt like overnight, everyone's entire world just got flipped upside down, and public and private had to react very quickly. And so, Steve, I want to start with you with this question, but government's not always known for moving fast or being the most nimble. But the pandemic forced us to facilitate virtual public engagement overnight. And so, looking back, what do you think were the keys to Lane County success, and what was the most challenging aspect of this?
Yeah, I think one of the main keys was just the urgency and scarcity. Anytime you have scarcity of something, it tends to focus you and sort of force some creativity and action. And it's the challenge always in government, is that we are oftentimes, we have these processes and systems and bureaucracies that exist, and we like to study things and take our time to evaluate things. And what the beginning of the pandemic did was really just force us to say, we got to do something different here. So that was, I think, one of the greatest assets that we had, was the speed with which we had to react. We were just forced to. No time to study, no time to task force it to death. We just had to come up with a solution. One of the challenges for us that I guess was also a positive is that at the same time we were trying to figure out how to do meetings virtually, we were also moving all of our staff, 2/3, setting up about 2/3 of our employees to be able to work remotely. So we had all of our technology staff that was scurrying to get everyone, literally within a matter of days and about a week, to get everyone set up to work remotely. And what that also created was an environment where our technology department sort of said to the staff running our board meetings, just figure out the application and the process that you need. You understand that business better than we do. Go do what you need to do. So we selected, like for our board meetings, we selected a tool called GoToWebinar, and I'll touch on that in a minute, but kind of gives the ability to manage the public dynamics of a board or council meeting. And that's been really effective. But I would say, generally speaking, just that speed, it was a challenge for us initially because this wasn't something we had really looked at. So we hadn't really considered that we would ever do meetings virtually. So we didn't have like a bunch of research and analysis that we had done that led up to it. So it really was that kind of urgency to act in the moment.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Steve. And Ken, I'm curious to hear from Franklin County's perspective. What do you think made you successful, and what was the most challenging?
Thank you, Austin. The biggest key to our success was intergovernmental collaboration. Having all of the key players at the table, county administration, our chief information officer, and our clerk, and our data center, and our public facilities management department all had to in short order come together and ensure that, we moved quickly and on the same page to implement the necessary enhancements to our meetings. Organizing what we needed to accomplish through a virtual format from an operations standpoint was critical. We always focus on being heavy on the planning, but you had to do it in a very compressed time frame because county government operations, the business of government could not face interruption. And we also were fortunate that we utilize low friction solutions such as Zoom and Facebook. And, at the same time we were doing this, we had all these other things going on in the community while others were utilizing the same virtual tools. But I would say that the greatest challenges were around lack of access to appropriate hardware for staff and participants in our meetings, because suddenly everyone was competing for microphones, cameras, and headsets. Education, everything went virtual at the same time. And vendors were providing 6 to 8 week lead times and store shelves were empty. And finding access to reliable high-speed internet, because many home subscribers that went home to work, they had multiple things going on in their households, and they found out that under these conditions, their internet provider solution could not handle these multiple streaming devices all working simultaneously in the households.
Yeah. Work from home became the opposite, right? It was all in the same building, same home. I think what's interesting is what was a challenge for both organizations was also a key to success for both, which was there was no option, right? We didn't have a choice. We just had to do it. So thank you. I want to pivot to, kind of the next stage, which is we know what we have to do. And in a lot of ways, we're building the plane while trying to fly it, right? We're all innovating on the run, figuring out how to do this as good as possible. And so at this point, traditional models of public engagement, of council commission meetings, they just don't work or they're not possible. So Ken, I'll start with you this time, but can you talk about what new communication platforms or channels Franklin County used?
We had a heavy reliance on Zoom, which progressed over time to ensure that our meeting channels were secure, and at the same time remaining to be agile and open to the wishes and the needs of others to participate was something that we really had to rely on. We also were able to implement administrative briefing calls, which were held over a 1-800 line, essentially, where individuals didn't have to have the access or put the stress on their broadband systems in their homes to be able to get information 7 days a week for several months. We did that.
Great, thank you. Steve, can you talk about Lane County's journey and experience?
Yeah, so I mentioned GoToWebinar. We landed on GoToWebinar as a tool for our for our public board meetings, because it has some controls to it that allow we felt like better facilitation of public comment. It allows the public to register for the meeting, to call in. There's a moderator that can sort of decide, who's a panelist versus a presenter versus a speaker from the public. We have a timed public comment process at our board meetings, so you get 3 minutes to speak, and so we have a timer up, and it allowed for our board organizer to manage all of that dynamic. So GoToWebinar has worked well from that standpoint of being able to sort of manage the complex dynamic of public meetings. probably not the most friendly tool in terms of ease of accessibility. We also use GoToMeeting for our like internal to the organization. We've gravitated from GoTo to Microsoft Teams now internally. So we're using Teams, which is a little more user friendly. And then of course, so this was one of the challenges we had is then you got people using Zoom and WebEx. And I mean, I think I just named half a dozen tools. So there's a lot, you got to download all these things and there's security concerns and passwords and all this stuff. So I think that was a challenge early on, was kind of just navigating, everyone's using a different platform and what's the right thing for us to do. I will say in terms of innovation, what we found was less, so it wasn't the tool as much as it was the utilization of multiple opportunities to communicate with people. So for example, at counties, most counties across the country are public health authorities. In Lane County, we're the public health authority. So we were doing daily Facebook live videos, news conferences on updates on the pandemic. And so we'd have our public information officer and our public health officer that would do these daily briefings on Facebook Live. It actually was a great tool that we'd never used before to have a regular briefing. The media could all access it. The public could all watch it and access it to get really consistent, factual information directly out to people. That's not something we've ever had before this pandemic. You always, you call a news conference and you invite people into a place, or you talk to a reporter, and it's filtered through those sources. This was really one of the first times that we were able to communicate directly with the public without like any filter or interpretation happening there. And so I think that was a real benefit to utilize social media, cable television, radio, and these various software platforms.
Yeah, thank you. And so it feels like, obviously we all had to decide on what platform we were using, but there were other greater considerations that were even more important than the type of software, the type of hardware. And I want to use that as a transition to the next piece, which is really around equity and accessibility, and an overarching piece of all the work, but especially when we're thinking about public engagement. And so, we've pivoted, we figured out new ways of facilitating public engagement, but then there are also these new equity and accessibility concerns, and some that existed previously. So Steve, I'll start with you on this one, but while that virtual engagement may be better for some, it also brings up other issues, whether it's language barriers, disabilities, rural, lack of internet, unfamiliar tech, lack of trust in government. How did Lane County overcome these barriers?
Yeah, this is a tough one because I think that I'm not sure that we did overcome them. I think if anything, what the pandemic, and then for us in Lane County, we had a historic wildfire just a year ago. It burned 700 structures in our county and impacted a lot of folks in rural parts of kind of the eastern part of our county. I think what those events have done is highlight the challenge in accessibility for rural communities, for historically underserved communities that maybe don't have as easy access to reliable internet access, bandwidth, computers, may have language barriers. So for example, GoToWebinar, and on those platforms, while it's easier if you have access to a computer and bandwidth, it's actually easier to access our board meetings, right? If you have access to social media and Facebook, you have better access to information, but it assumes you have access to those platforms and to be able to navigate those systems. If you don't have that, then arguably there's potentially even less access than there was previously. So I think it's a real issue. We certainly found this in the wildfire event which was just a year ago. Communication with folks, what we say upriver in the rural areas that were affected. You don't do Facebook Live briefings. You don't do virtual meetings. They don't have reliable bandwidth. So it was like, we have to go to the community. We got to drive 45 minutes upriver in this case to meet in person with folks in the middle of a pandemic. You got to figure out how to facilitate that. We were having these major service, we call them multi-agency resource centers that we set up for people to access services who've been affected by the fire. It had to be in person because there's no other way to do that. And I think it's true also that we struggle, generally speaking, with underserved communities in terms of language barriers. In our board meetings, we still have not figured out how to provide language translation if you're non-English speaking from those board meetings, how to make it accessible to folks to be able to call in for public comment if you don't have bandwidth. So I think those have been highlighted, and it's a gap that exists that we need to continue to try to solve.
Thanks, Steve. Ken, can you talk to us about Franklin County's approach to these equity and accessibility barriers?
Yes, thanks, Austin. Yeah, the issues around equity and accessibility, are quite real. They were before the pandemic, and they are now during the pandemic. We relied on tried and true methods of ensuring public access, such as our governmental TV station relationship was maintained throughout the pandemic. So those that were used to watching our sessions via television, we were able to work our technology out together with our local television provider, also closed captioning on YouTube, and simply a quick turnaround on the publishing of meeting agendas and minutes. All these things help increase access to information. What was really surprising is the use of Facebook Live. We began to develop what's called community conversations. And with those conversations, we were able to really increase our access to the business and the conversations of government. People from their cell phones were able to tune into those discussions and hear from the commissioners discussing vital topics and information that was impacting the community real time. And we included sign language translation for the majority of those commissioner conversations in order to create additional equity for folks. I think that our meetings are generally held before the pandemic at times where people that were working couldn't necessarily be there on a Tuesday at 9 a.m., find parking downtown, work through the traffic. But now, since we've had a hybrid system in place, it's a lot easier to access a general session meeting or a briefing meeting of the Board of Commissioners. So individuals' access and exposure to the business of county government, I think, has actually been improved from a ease standpoint. So that is one of the bright spots to come out of this pandemic.
Yeah, Austin, can I add two quick things just really that I was thinking about as Ken was talking?
Go ahead.
The two things that we did, I think, successfully related to vaccinations in particular for historically underserved communities is we realized that, government, we're not necessarily the best messenger to communities that have reason to not always trust government. And so when vaccinations were rolling out and we knew that there was vaccine hesitancy, particularly among communities of color, we worked really closely with elders in the communities of color to help us that were trusted, right? In the Latinx community, in the Black community in particular. And then we did a number of videos with those individuals, with those elders in communities of color, and then put those out via social media. And so they were the ones those elders in those communities were the ones that were communicating the message, right? Their trusted source of information, saying, "Hey, listen, I got the vaccine. This is why I got the vaccine. This is why I think you should get it." So it was a trusted source of information that we helped facilitate, but it wasn't, a government official necessarily doing that. So that was one. The other was working with established organizations, both in the same instance in the Latinx community and in the Black community, working with NAACP and El Centro and a number of others to have them host vaccine clinics, right? And then put the messaging out to this. So I think a lesson learned for us was like, the message coming directly from government in terms of increasing access and information and opportunity. We really need to partner with the individuals and the entities within the community that are embedded in the community, that are trusted by different communities, to carry that message. And so we did that with the vaccine clinics, where NAACP held a number of clinics. Like they'd host them at their site. They'd have all of their officials there, and we would provide the healthcare professionals that would conduct the vaccination, but all the communication. And so there was a level of trust there that people were like, okay, it's being hosted by NAACP, not by the government. So there was more trust there. So I think those were two really important things that you can extrapolate some lessons from that to other ways that it's important for us to communicate in really figuring out who are the trusted people in the community that can help carry those messages and engage folks.
Thanks, Steve. Yeah, I from hearing both of you speak, and I struggle to say anything from the pandemic was positive, but maybe something that was productive from it all is that it elevated gaps that weren't as well known before, especially around equity and underserved communities. And it also elevated a lot of those community groups you mentioned that have been doing great, amazing work for so long, and put them in a position to now be better supported and to be better partners too. So I appreciate that. I want to move to the next piece, which is kind of being a little more forward thinking at this point, right? We've got a better handle on hybrid and virtual at this point on council and commission meetings. It feels like we need to start preparing for a transition back to more in person, depending on how things go. But especially since for a lot of community organizations, virtual engagement boosted public participation. So Ken, I'll start with you on this one, but how do you think Franklin County sustains the momentum of virtual engagement as we return to in-person?
Thanks, Austin. Yes, Franklin County had to pivot when the legislature declined from renewing the virtual meeting authority. So in July of this year, we had to return to in-person meetings for elected bodies to actually take votes in person. So in order to keep the momentum, we maintained and modified our hybrid meeting format in an attempt to keep this increased public participation. Our officials are in person, but our agency directors present resolutions. The public has a vehicle to come in via Zoom the way they had during the pandemic when we had virtual meeting legislative authority. So we'll continue to monitor it and see if the excitement of county government and what we do and people having a better understanding of it as more things begin to change in our environment. But most importantly, organizations need to provide a method for real-time participation and engagement that is manageable. For example, we provide residents the opportunity to complete an online virtual witness speaker slip. And we then grant them 3 minutes during public meetings to address comments. So they can come on and do that. And there are also other methods such as Q&A features that allow participants to ask panelists questions and to be addressed in a controlled fashion.
Thanks, Ken. I think what was interesting, and Steve, maybe we experienced this in Oregon, but Franklin County was dependent on Ohio providing the authority to even have decisions made in virtual. So I know, Ken, from talking to you, that was one thing that was kind of out of your control and something you were dependent on as a county. But Steve, for Lane County, how do you think we sustain that momentum moving forward?
Yeah, and in Lane County, we're a home rule charter county, so we have some independent authority. So we didn't require that same kind of authority, which was nice. I would say that interestingly, we actually didn't see a boost in participation at our board meetings compared to, Ken kind of said around equity and access, the challenges were kind of the same in person. They existed before COVID and they kind of still exist. Like what we've identified is we now have more tools available to us with which to communicate, but those tools in and of themselves don't necessarily increase participation. What we saw, I think my takeaway is, the tools can be useful to kind of open doors, but it's really about the quality of the content of what you have, right? The value of the information that you're sharing. That's where people are going to tune in if they feel like you have information that's really critical for them. So those things like Facebook Live, as Ken said, that was just huge. I mean, the number of people that follow us now on social media platforms and pay attention to because we were putting out information that no one else had, right? On Facebook and Twitter and Instagram and all those things, we're putting out really relevant information that everybody wanted and no one else really had. So that was critical. And that's where we saw a significant amount of increased participation because people were coming to us like, oh, you have information we really want. So I think there's a lesson there. One of the things that I did throughout the pandemic, I started very early on in the pandemic, sending out a daily email to employees. And the idea was just when there was so much uncertainty in the early days, March of 2020, we were just like, we just have to tell people what we know. So I started sending out this email and I did it for a couple of weeks. And then I was like, all right, I'm done doing daily emails. Well, then our employees were like, no, we need that information. So I, for a year, sent out a daily email. And then it was literally me every night. I would just sit and kind of type an email out of like, here are cases and here's the data from what we know in the community. Here are policy changes at the state and federal level. Here are things we know. And it became, and then we expanded it to the community. So I did a message that went out to like regional partners. So other cities and governmental entities and established partners. And then a group that was like community, opinion leaders and stakeholders. So I did 3 different emails, basically the same type of information. But that sounds like, oh, it's just an email. Well, I can tell you before the pandemic, we did a newsletter to the community and to employees. Not many people read it. But now all of a sudden, people were like glued to the information. And I mean, anytime I tried to stop it or go less frequent, they're like, no, you have to keep doing that. So I think the lesson for me is like, it doesn't matter if you're sending an email, if you're texting, if you're social media, if you have an online platform. It's really, are you sharing information that is important to people, that's relevant, that they really need and care about, that's honest? One of the things that we tried to do in those daily messages was like, we just put it out there. We were very real about things about mental illness that employees were facing, challenges of stress and mental illness. We're very real around issues of the racial reckoning we were going through in the country that was very divisive in a lot of ways. We were honest about that, and we just had conversation. So people gravitated to sort of the quality of the information they were receiving and the honesty with which we were trying to put it forward. We weren't trying to filter stuff. We weren't trying to like polish it and make it all pretty and nice. It was just like, it was kind of a dump of what we were dealing with at the time. And that really resonated. So I think there's a lesson there for us to take, that sometimes in government, one of the things that the National Association of County Administrators is doing is participating with the Center for Public Impact in this Fail Forward initiative. We have 5 counties that are doing this 5-county cohort nationally. And it's all around kind of unleashing a little bit of risk taking in government, because we're so risk averse. And I think there's some lessons here as it relates to how we communicate with the public. We kind of have to strip away a lot of those things we're worried about and just try new stuff, and what works, keep doing that.
Thank you. That's the perfect segue to the next topic. And I think we've touched on this through the discussion already, but there are pivots we made over the past year and a half or so, some of them temporary, but it feels like a lot of them may be permanent, right? Especially if we want to maintain momentum, we can't roll back all the ways we increased engagement. So Steve, I want to go to you first for this one, but can you talk about changes to the county's public engagement approach that will remain permanent moving forward?
Yeah, I'll try to keep this one brief. I mean, we will continue. So we're gonna, when we go back in person, and we're not there yet because of Delta and everything. So, but when we do go back in person, it'll be a hybrid option, right? So we want to get back in person. Our board wants to meet, in the chambers and allow people to come in. But we will always have now an option for people to call in virtually, because, as opposed to having our board meetings are at 9 a.m. on a Tuesday morning. How many people can come to a government board meeting at 9 a.m. on a Tuesday? Most people are working or have other obligations. So the opportunity to call in or dial in virtually is really compelling. So we will continue that, and then continue all these things that we know have really worked. This sort of outreach and engagement with groups that are critical to getting information out, the direct communication, right? Is really using social media in meaningful ways to get information directly out to people. Those things will definitely continue.
Thank you. Ken, we talked about you lost the statutory authority, so you're, I feel like, a little further along in the hybrid process and getting back to in-person. So can you talk about what will remain permanent changes for Franklin County?
Sure. Thanks, Austin. Yes, as Steve stated, we had to make, since Franklin County had to make the transition to in-person meetings due to the lack of statutory authority, it allowed us to make the decision that we wanted to continue to have the hybrid meeting model to allow for the community to have that option to access county government in its operations. So I think that we will continue to refine our technology to make that experience more like if they were there in person. To ensure that we have we're working through things to improve the resolution, for example, of all of the people that are interacting in the meeting process. We will continue to, while it's important to have a controlled environment, but continue to make it easier to be able to interact and provide public comment. I see that, when for example, the American Rescue Plan, we had a public hearing where we were able to talk about the county's priorities around the American Rescue Plan, but we were able to have a significant amount of public participation in that process that was much more engaging, and we were able to have more people than we would have had in a traditional public hearing setting. I'm positive of that because of the ease to be able to log in and provide our county commissioners with feedback.
Thanks, Ken. Appreciate that. And Steve, for actually, as we kind of close this out and move on to our last sort of topic here today, as both of you reflect on the collective experiences, is there anything you would have done differently? What lessons learned would you pass on to other organizations? Steve, you want to take that one first?
Yeah, I mean, I think, we talked about the serving or the access for historically underserved and marginalized communities. That's just one, I'm disappointed that we haven't figured that out. And I think the good thing is it's been highlighted as the problem that it is. We understand that actually just having a virtual option is not what is in and of itself going to increase access and participation for historically underserved communities. So I think that's we knew that, as Ken said, we knew this before. It was a problem before the pandemic, and I think it's been highlighted even more so now through the pandemic. And so I think that's a lesson learned for sure, and it's a problem and a challenge that has to get solved going forward.
Thanks, Steve. Ken, anything Franklin County would have done differently? Any lessons learned you want to share?
I think our biggest lessons in Franklin County were to remain agile, to work collaboratively, and recognize that during a pandemic, planning out as far as in advance as you can is a must when you're dealing with supply chain issues and access to equipment. But my most important thing I would like to leave the listeners with is we never gave up. Early on, there were audio challenges, connectivity challenges, but we never gave up, and we continue to make improvements with each and every virtual meeting and refining the process. So my takeaway is we never gave up, I think, and that we can't quit on this attitude because we got to continue to operate at the highest level possible.
Yeah. Well, thank you both. I appreciate it so much for joining today and sharing the experiences of your two counties. I know we've got some people virtually and we've got some people in the room, so happy to open it up for any questions at this point. For our in-room moderator, can you help us if there's any questions in the room since we can't see folks?
Yes, sir. I got you. Was there any questions in this room? Here. We got one.
All right, let's have at it.
Hey, good morning, everyone. My name is Jane Bice de Sessa. I'm the city manager for the city of Brighton. So we experienced many of the issues that you all dealt with. I guess I was looking more for some recommendations in terms of the type of programs that you use. We obviously we use Zoom, and I think only once did we use the what do you call the assistance for signing for someone who could do the report using Sign. So now we are back, though. We are 100% back. Our city council does not want to meet via Zoom. I've taken some steps to protect the council, so that they're not too close to each other, and I put some barriers, acrylic barriers, so that that further protects them. I guess I heard you use the GoToWebinar. Is this what you're still using? I guess I'm looking for some future recommendations for other types of programs besides Zoom. Anything else? Thank you.
Yeah, so for Lane County, we're still using GoToWebinar. It is our plan to continue to use that when we move into a hybrid option. And so, as I said, we're gonna so we are considering translation services and what that will look like, and how, frankly, in person, it's easier to provide translation services if you have or can access and pay for a translator to do that in person. Adding the virtual component creates some complication certainly because you have, you don't have the two people physically in the same location. So we're trying to identify what the best solution to that gap will be. One of the challenges that we've had with GoTo, I think we've been very happy with it in terms of managing the challenges, sort of the restrictive practices of a public meeting where you have all this protocol of sort of, people speaking for a period of time and then having to cut them off and just manage all of that. What GoTo doesn't do is provide a translation service directly. And so that's something that we're trying to figure out how we can do that in person and apply it to the virtual environment as well. And what we don't know, of course, is how many people going forward will participate in the virtual option when we're in person. The one thing I would say is we were doing monthly public comment sessions. Our board was wanting to do a meeting once a month where all they did was take public comment. So it was a way to, like, in the evening they did it. And so when we did it in person, we had a lot of people that would show up. And then we did it virtually during COVID, nobody showed up. So it was really interesting. And so they stopped doing it because they're like, why are we doing these virtual options and no one's showing up? It's kind of a waste. So I think it'll be interesting when we move back to the hybrid option and we're in person, how many people will actually take advantage of that virtual platform.
Thanks. Ken, do you have anything to add?
Can I follow up on that question, please, Austin?
Oh yeah, go ahead.
Again, this is Jane again. So Steve, I mean, we had the same issues, and I think probably the reason a lot of people didn't show up, or at least this is just my assumption, is that because many folks or the residents, they didn't have good Wi-Fi in their houses, in their homes. So I think as a city administrator, that's one of the things I'm looking at to see if I can improve connectivity, throughout our community. So I'm going to be looking at that. And then the other thing that I'm going to be looking at is if it's not COVID, it's going to be something else, right, in the future. So plan ahead, right? At least that's what I'm thinking. What are your thoughts on that, on the planning ahead? I know that eventually, the new normal will be a little different. I think that from now on, we're probably going to continue to have this hybrid, but I would certainly appreciate your thoughts on preparing for the future. I know everybody hates being on Zoom. I know I'm sick of it. But certainly I know that whether it be some type of natural disaster or whatever, we're gonna continue to have something like this. So I'm gonna be looking at that. Our IT department is having some issues with the hybrid model. We're gonna have to make some mega modifications to IT in our city. That's one thing that we're looking at. Anyway, what are your thoughts about the future? Is this like a forever thing now, or we as city managers or even just IT administrators that are here, what are your thoughts on that? Should we continue to plan to administer and manage this type of systems? Thank you.
Yeah, I'll try to, because I want to get Ken in here too, but I think I would say, yes, I do think it's here to stay. I think the virtual option is here to stay. As I said earlier, I think one of the things that we've learned is just having the platform. So just having GoToWebinar or Zoom or any virtual platform, that's not the thing that creates more participation. It opens the door for more participation, but really, so I gave the example of the outreach we did around vaccinations with underserved communities, and particularly like the vaccination clinics that we worked with community organizations to host. I think there's the potential that, because a lot of folks, they don't know how to navigate a board meeting. They're not comfortable with it, right? You kind of come in and there's all this protocol and you don't know, it's an intimidating environment for a lot of people. We knew that before COVID. So I think there's an opportunity though with the virtual platform to work with organizations, I would say like NAACP or Latinx organizations where we know there have been historically immigration concerns about people coming, right, being in person and not trusting government. And if they show up at things, So I think now we have the opportunity is if we can work with trusted organizations in the community that serve those populations, to have them host, for example, it could be just a public comment, or they could, host an event where they have Wi-Fi access in their facility, and then the folks in those communities can go to that location, and there's a sense of like safety and trust there. That's a way that I think we can increase participation and access for folks. So I would say yes, absolutely. I think this is an option that has to continue to be out there, but we've got to find the right way to connect with the people that are trusted in the community to actually increase participation.
You got one more?
Ken, did you have anything to add to that before we go to the next
I would
one?
just only add, in my opinion, here in Franklin County, the hybrid model will be permanent. As permanent as anything can be in government. We all know in this business, resiliency and the ability to adapt to change is something that we live with. But I think that your IT departments, your chief information officer, I know our county clerk had to become technology strong in short order because we meet every Tuesday, like Oregon at 9 a.m. and we have multiple things going on. And we may have, 30, 40, resolutions on the agenda. And all of the way we're set up now, all of our elected officials may be coming in via Zoom, and our agencies are presenting resolutions via Zoom, while our elected officials and folks like myself are there in person. While we have no public health emergency order in place in the state of Ohio right now. So at the same time, our doors are open to anyone that would elect to come in public, assist upon being here, present in public for our meetings. But we are having individuals that we are contract partners. We will have to have the capacity in place for them to be able to come in remotely. As been stated here, even though the county has used Zoom and Zoom webinar, we have a professional license through them. The city of Columbus, which is the largest city in Franklin County, uses Cisco WebEx. And there's other products out there, and there will continue to be vendors improve their products so that governmental entities that want the hybrid approach will be able to do so. But in my humble opinion, I think that the hybrid approach is here to stay, even though many of us are burned out of Zoom and Microsoft Teams, et cetera, et cetera. But I do think that this is a component of our lives to stay, and it will evolve over time. Who has a 7-year cell phone and what it looks like? All of these things evolve over time.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ken, and thanks for the questions, Jane. I know we've got a question in the chat, so I want to get to Patty's question. So Patty from the city of Glendale, she said one of her challenges working from home during the pandemic was that she had to use a hotspot to be able to work from home. And she knows the internet is a challenge, and so she's wondering, how did your organizations help employees handle that type of issue?
Yeah, so I would say for us in Lane County, we really tried to work with our employees. We had an approach throughout the pandemic. We've said, listen, we don't want to have to lay anyone off. We understand these health and safety concerns. We understand childcare concerns and constraints and other family care needs that are out there, people that have underlying medical conditions. So we really tried to have an approach, as I know a lot of public sector agencies did, of supporting our employees. So we did encourage remote work for as many people as possible. We felt it was important because there were people that have to be in person in order for those people to be safe to be in person, we needed some people to be working remotely. So we did, we created a whole policy around this, a series of policies around remote work and things that were required. We provided all the equipment for our employees. So we would set them up with what they needed at home to be able to do that. They did have to have internet connection. And so, we do have employees that live in rural or outlying areas. If they simply didn't have internet connection, we would try to work with them on maybe a few days a week being able to work remotely if they could. Otherwise, we would say we just wanted as many people to work remotely who could, because they had access to internet and were able to do that. And then if you didn't have that, then we would say, you need to work in person if your job requires you to be logged into a system. So we tried to deal with those on a case-by-case basis. And I think we did provide some hotspots in some of those types of technologies for people to access if that was something that worked. Our general approach, again, was to try to accommodate, to try to find a solution for folks so that they could get set up remotely. We have since brought more and more people back, because the thing we've realized is, of course, a lot of our services need to be provided in person, even if they don't have to. For example, building permits and planning. We closed our customer service center. It was not good customer service to be doing phone calls and emails that way. You really want to do it in person. So we've moved those people back, but we've tried to keep others where if they can get their job done just as well at home or in a remote location, then we've tried to continue that for as long as we can.
Thanks, Steve. Ken?
Yeah, in Franklin County, we did a lot of the same things. We had PC in a box. We sent a lot of employees home with the PC, with a hotspot if we needed to. Because in Franklin County and the entire state, counties administer social services on behalf of the state for our Job and Family Services Department. So we had to deal with some connectivity issues to ensure that our employees could connect with state systems for the administration of cash benefits and for child care and food assistance and all of those programs. But one thing we found out, and it's an issue in many communities around the country, is that digital equity is a bigger issue than we all may realize. And we found out some of our employees were relying upon, the use of cell phones to be their hotspot, even in their homes prior to the pandemic occurring. So the larger issue that, I see as county administrator, and where there's a coalition of people here in Franklin County working on it, is increasing general access to reliable, appropriate speed internet for all of our residents. We must get that done. So as was stated before, the next thing happens as communities, we need to treat Wi-Fi access as another public utility.
Yeah. Thanks, Ken. I think that resonates with everyone in the room, just given the momentum and how pandemic highlighted the inequities in broadband around the country. Are there any other questions?
Yes, I have a question. I'm in the audience physically here. I'm Ramiro Salazar, Director of the San Antonio Public Library for the City of San Antonio. We have a library board of trustees that has policymaking authority. So our board meetings should be open to and are open to the public. So I share many of the issues that were described and shared by the panel. And I may be in the minority, no pun intended, but I feel that the virtual experience may be an opportunity that we need to tap into. I certainly recognize the challenges of connectivity and lack of high speed and so on. But I think as we move forward and maybe companies can start getting smarter or perhaps they're working on how to make it easier. And I certainly agreed with Kenneth's comment about this pandemic has really magnified the issue of the digital divide and how do we deal with that. And but I see it as again, virtual meetings as an opportunity because it breaks down, from my perspective, some of the barriers of access, transportation, language, and so. And as I was thinking about this, so well, libraries were in San Antonio, we have a huge footprint. Perhaps we could serve as connectors. We have high-speed, obviously, internet, but I don't want to get into that. Now let me get to the real question, the question I wanted to pose to the panel. So in San Antonio, we are looking at a hybrid model, and I understand that in different states, you have different mandates. In our state, effective September 1st, we governing boards like ours must start meeting in person, and there is a hybrid opportunity as long as they're physically present, at least a quorum. In our case, we have 11 members, 6 is the quorum. My concern is that some board members have opted to do virtual only, claiming that they're concerned about exposure. But my real concern is more convenience. So what kind of recommendations would you give a board or council to provide some parity for board members to participate, some virtually and some in person? That's a question.
Thanks, Ramiro. That's a good question. And I think a lot of organizations are probably trying to wrap their head around that. Steve or Ken, anyone want to take a shot at that?
I think that it presents challenges for a governmental body to have a mixture of officials in person and virtual because of the dialogue and the debate. Can that effectively happen with colleagues spread out? But if your individual jurisdiction state allows for that, I think once again, you got to rely heavily on your technology professionals to close that gap between your officials that will be virtual and your officials that are in person. But, being devil's advocate, I think that, there's reason to embrace that, because if you look at a particular instance, to allow a hybrid approach also enhances accessibility. It's not easy, but it may be a particular instance where accessibility may be something that you value. I think that we all look to making accommodations where possible, and a lot of times we are limited by statute in what we can do. But I'm just going to present a hypothetical where I would argue that it's ideal that an official be able to participate. Let's just say that they had a knee replacement, and it would make it difficult for them to come into a downtown office facility and be able to participate with their colleagues. But as the question was posed, if you are able to be present and part of the quorum virtually, I think that is a good thing. That's a positive. That's something that we should, you should accommodate. But again, it's all directed by your particular state, or whether you are home rule, it's just all driven by that because we have so many different governmental entities that operate in different ways. When we talk about county government, we're talking about 3,000 plus counties, and they all are in different states with different rules.
Yeah, I agree with what Ken is saying. We actually looked at this when we were talking about going back to in person in August for our board meetings. Our board really, like many of yours, they want to get back in person, they want to do it. And we were like, how are we going to do this? And can we have the public there? Can we have staff there? Should we just have the commissioners in the room? And not exactly knowing what COVID was going to be, where COVID was going to be, and where the state rules were going to be at. We were considering options like, well, should we just have staff and the public participate virtually? And I agree with Ken, the bottom line. I think that having that as an option, I don't think it's ideal. I think there's always going to be this element where participating virtually, when we're back in person, participating virtually is not going to be as good. It never is, right? Like the three of us on this panel would rather be in the room with all of you because we can't see you right now. And there's things lost in translation. So it would be much better if we were in person. But this is better than not doing it, right? So I think having the option of virtual, for example, previously before COVID, we would have commissioners and they'd have a family medical emergency. They couldn't make a board meeting. Well, there was no option for them to participate in the board meeting, really, if they had to be away. Well, now they can. It's not as good as being in person, but it's better than not being there at all. And so I think that, considering that as if it's an option, consultants, if it saves on fees from having consultants having to fly from the East Coast out to the West Coast because they can present virtually, and that's a better scenario, then that should be considered. So I think it's going to be sort of this, it'll be an option that needs to be available, but probably not the most ideal or the first option to pursue.
No. Thank you both.
I think we have one more question.
Okay.
Well, it's me, Ramiro Salazar again. As a follow-up, actually, what you just stated, yeah, for some of us, this may not be ideal, but there's some opportunities to include participation for those. I'm talking about this panel session, for those individuals that couldn't travel for whatever reason here could participate. Well, yeah, I agree with you. Having you here physically, it might enhance the experience, but it doesn't take away from the messages that were shared and the information that was shared with those that are here physically and those that are participating virtually. So it's going back to the comment that I made, that I see the virtual environment as actually an opportunity. I don't think we totally adapted to that reality, perhaps. Yes, sure. I like the idea of having a physical dialogue and seeing the subtleties of facial expressions and so on. But to me, it's a matter of adapting. So I just wanted to make that comment.
Thanks, Ramiro. I appreciate that. I totally agree. And I think maybe to something Jane asked earlier around, should we be preparing for this for the foreseeable future, or how do we? I think with that opportunity to, take advantage of virtual opportunities, there's also the opportunity to prepare yourself for a hybrid model for the foreseeable future to make you more resilient. I know a lot of organizations right now are buying new cameras, buying new hardware, just in preparation for a hybrid model permanently. And if we ever have to go back to a lockdown situation, that infrastructure is there, and we don't have to scramble all over again. But Ken, I saw you unmute. Did you have something to add?
No, I agree with the comments made here. We gotta take advantage of opportunities as they exist going forward to increase accessibility and equity. But laws have been very restrictive in a number of states related to the acts of elected bodies. Even, to be able to vote, to call in via conference call was like unheard of, to be able to participate in a meeting and be able to take a vote. But now I believe you will see laws change that will provide additional opportunities for the accessibility and the equity that we all value to be maximized in a greater way.
Thanks, Ken. Well, if there's no other questions, I really appreciate both of your time today, Stephen and Ken, and I appreciate the questions from the audience virtually and in person. Hopefully we get to meet some of you in person at ICMA in Portland, if you'll be able to make the trip. But otherwise, any closing words at this point, Steve or Ken?
I just want to thank you, Austin, for facilitating this, and to Raymond Gonzalez. Really appreciate all the work that's happening at LGHN, and looking forward, hopefully, to seeing folks at ICMA the next few months. And I think, yeah, my overall takeaway from this is we certainly don't have all the answers. I didn't expect that Ken and I were going to have all the answers, but hopefully you got some information. And I think the point, I heard Ken say, and I'll just restate this. I think it's the resiliency and the sort of commitment to just figure it out, and to work through all these challenges, and the process of continuous improvement that we've done over the past year is a really good lesson to learn. The resiliency that I've seen in local government, given all that we've been through, is really amazing. And so I'm excited to see, how we can take some of these lessons and advance our organizations and our roles in our communities in the future. Thanks, everyone.
Great. All right. Thank you both. I appreciate it. And thanks to everyone who attended the conference. Have a good one.
Everyone have a good one. Be safe, be well, everyone.